Hi, Hunter Hastings here. 99.9% of businesses in the US and Canada today are deemed to be small businesses. That can mean from one employee to hundreds of employees. It could mean from tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. What they all need to succeed is systems. Not management, which is human intervention and direction, especially when things are going wrong, but systems, which is how things work when they're working well, when the business is growing, when it's profitable, when cash flow is good, when teams are working well. Systems are what makes that happen.
This is the Value Creators Podcast. Value creation is the sole purpose of any business and every business, and for all of us as entrepreneurs. Listen to great value creators as they share their successes, trials, and lessons learned. Join us as we explore how to think as value creators, how to act as value creators, and how to view business through the lens of value creation.
Our guest today is Beverlee Rasmussen. Beverlee's been a successful small business owner. She started and grew and eventually sold a very, very successful travel agency. Since then, she studied executive coaching and organizational development at Royal Roads University, and she became a professional certified coach of the ICF, the International Coach Federation, and was ICF Business Coach of the Year. She's met with thousands of small businesses and put in thousands of hours of business development into her system of systems, creating the most effective small business development program in the world. Beverlee, welcome to the Value Creators Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Hunter. I appreciate it. I'm excited about today.
Well, we're excited too. You're very committed to helping small businesses succeed. In fact, you say get back the joy and excitement of running a small business because sometimes they can get overwhelmed by some of the challenges. Maybe we can start there. You've encountered a lot of small business owners. And in your new book, Small Business, Big Opportunity, you mentioned some anecdotes about some of those challenges. Maybe you can tell us about meeting small business owners, how you got there and how you developed this commitment to help them.
It's a great start. I think it really starts with my own experience building, running, and selling a business. Most entrepreneurs, they end up in business almost accidentally or, for some other circumstance. They don't just, it's not for everyone. In my case, I was a single mom and I had a hard time placing my child in daycare. They were hard to find and he was a really busy kid. And so I kind of felt like I had to own my own business. And then so here I am, I'm a great travel agent. And now all of a sudden I'm a business owner. And what do I know about running a business? I know everything about travel, but I had to learn how to hire and I need to learn how to have there's leasehold improvements and just all the government regulations, bookkeeping, marketing, everything that goes with business. And so fortunately, I came across the idea of systems really early and was quite successful with that business. I got it systematized in about a year and a half and it built, ran, and sold it in 7 years. So there's lots of stories I can tell you about that experience. But I went on from there to what I realized when I left that job or left that project is what I loved about that experience was not so much the travel, it was building, running, and selling the business. And why does it have to be so hard? And so looking back, I then took a job with another company and I interviewed 3,300 small business owners over the course of 4 years. And
Wow.
Honestly, Hunter, their stories broke my heart. Every day I heard about just marriages breaking up, businesses breaking. Actually, if you look at the statistics, and I'm in Canada, the statistics, any statistics I give you, you can multiply it times 10 in the United States. So in Canada, we have 1.21 million employer businesses, and 1.9 million of them are small business or considered small business. So 97%. Now, of those small businesses, they employ 7 out of 10 people. And that's the statistic right across the world. So small business owners are responsible for that. But here's the other statistic. 51% of those businesses will fail in the first 5 years. So that statistic and the conversations I had for 3 years and the statistic is one thing, but it's the stories behind the statistics that really broke my heart. I can give you one example, a quick story here. One of the last calls I took a call and I heard the sound. A woman answered the phone and I heard the sound. And if there's any moms listening today, they know I said to her, I go, is that a baby? And she just burst out crying. because she'd had a difficult delivery. She had a cesarean. She'd been in the hospital about a week, and she was sitting at her husband's office in their cabinet shop. And she was on the phone. There was an IRS issue. The bookkeeper didn't do something right while she was away. And her husband was frantically trying to get an order out the door. And it was that moment when I said, you know what, I can fix this business. This does not have to be this hard. There's obviously systems missing in place. And I think that's the point when I decided I started on this road of helping small business owners.
We're big fans of small business here, although I don't like the term small business. It's part of a network and an ecosystem that makes up the economy, and we're obsessed more by success than by size. But in your field guide for small business, you have the answer for a broken heart, which is systems. Let's just start on the general idea of systems, and then we'll dive into some of the specific systems that you spell out so comprehensively in that field guide.
So I think people think systems as an operations manual or policy or procedure manual. If we take a step back from that and look at some of the work of systems thinkers in the world, Donella Meadows, Peter Senge, a system, if you break down all the definitions that I've looked at, is simply a way something happens. So when you think of a system, it just really simplifies it. So if something is going wrong in your business, chances are there's a missing or broken system that's happening. And usually it's only a few systems that are causing most of the problems. So whether it's a financial system, you're not tracking your money, you don't know where you stand, or it's a hiring system, you've hired your mother-in-law because you just don't like hiring and it's easier and quicker and faster to hire your best friend. Those kinds of things happen because you don't have those systems in place. Marketing systems, leadership systems.
Well, I was a bit surprised, Beverlee, to find that you advocate a policy manual and a procedures manual and the specifications of the small business systems. We generally don't associate that with small business. I was going to tell you, when I was working in a giant corporation, we had a procedures manual, and I hated it. It was always a challenge to get through it. But you're saying, hey, that's a better way to run your business, is to develop those kinds of articulated systems, let's call them, like a procedures manual and a policy manual. Tell us more about that.
You look at the failure rate, and I think there's a direct line between being able to replicate what you're doing, strengthen and structure what you're doing, and being successful in business. Having systems in place means that it's not everything is in your head. It also gives you a business that you can sell. If you write it down, this is who we are, this is how we do it. You can delegate those tasks. You can automate those tasks. And, with a travel agency, my systems manual was only 27 pages. And yet when I sold the agency, the owner bought mine because of the manual, because he could step in, follow the system. He also, because I didn't work in the business. So I had managed to completely get the business to run independent of me because of systems. So you start with that org chart. And as a solopreneur, it's like me everywhere on the org chart. And so you look at that chart and say, okay, what systems could I put in place to replace me here? And that's a good visual as a place to start for putting in systems.
Yeah, and I'm particularly impressed by your thought that you increase the value of the asset by having those kinds of policy and procedure manuals. We've talked on the podcast in the past about building asset value in your small business so you can sell it, so you've got something to sell. So that's important.
That's a whole other podcast. You're totally true. That operations manual is, at least I've heard from valuators, at least worth $40,000 to $50,000, even if you have nothing else. You can build a small business. This is how it works. It needs to be profitable, even marginally profitable. With that operations manual, that's key. Because otherwise people are just buying a job.
Yeah, that's really valuable information, Beverlee. I hadn't thought of it that way. Let's itemize some of the systems. You start with leadership systems, which is, again, that's a bit surprising for a small business because the leadership is me. So how are you thinking about leadership systems for a small business?
Yeah, I can give you some really great examples. Let's take values, for example, and I know they're near and dear to your heart. So you think about, I'll give you an example of a roofing company. One of his values is safety. The system is identifying your values, living your values, operating through your values. And so in this one particular case, his value is safety, but he had his employees smoking and drinking in their trucks at lunchtime. And so through the coaching sessions, he's like frustrated with the employee because the employee's like high on the roof, literally high on the roof. Then at the end, we went through the value system and it's like, okay, actually that really matters to me. Safety actually does matter to me. Family matters to me. These are things. And so then when he was able to align his values with his employees, in this particular case, it was great because he did let the employee go, who came back a few years later. He got him some help with his addiction, and he came back and he's got 5 kids. It was a really good story, taking that like a value of systems, thinking about health is a system. Do you have breakfast in the morning? Do you need to? Maybe you don't need to. You're doing that new fancy diet and you don't need to. But are you taking care of yourself? Because entrepreneurs, they work themselves into the bone because they have no systems. They don't eat. They don't go to the doctor regularly. They don't take their medication. They just put everything aside to run the business. And then now maybe you have a successful business, but you don't have your health. So that would be considered, what is your system for taking care of yourself?
Yeah, we think sometimes in terms of a value system. And one of the ways to think about value is the things that matter to people, what they care deeply about. So you can systematize that in the sense of at least identifying those things, asking people what they care about, and then whether the current system is providing them fulfillment and what they care about, and organizing to increase that. So I think I begin to understand systems in that sense. So what about operations as a system? That seems a little bit closer to understanding, easily understanding, but you have a different way of thinking of an operating system. Tell us about that.
So interesting, and I don't know for your readers if you can see this. So I put all the systems on a board, and I'll just put that up there. And what I was surprised by when I put it together was systems is only one piece of 52 different competencies. So these are all systems in a business. And so along the line of operating systems, it's like, what's your strategy? And we can talk about that in a minute. What's the structure of the business? Are you a C Corp? Are you a solo? Like, what is, how are you going to, what is the structure? Obviously systems is the operations manual and how you do things. Production, are you looking at lean? Are you looking at ISO? What are the steps? Even if you're a small, you're a massage therapist, there's certain steps. You change the sheets, you do like different things that you do. Yeah, your supplies, facilities, technology, those are all operating parts. I broke it down into sections that made sense together. So how the business operates, all those systems.
I have a copy of that systems board, and the video is a bit blurry. Will it be okay to let people get a copy of that as a PDF? I can add it to the show notes.
Absolutely. That would be great to share that.
Okay. So one of the things you had in your operations section in the field guide, Beverlee, is checklist, very detailed checklist. So I counted one of them as a 34-item checklist for questions to ask yourself before you sign a lease, which was tremendously helpful. Does every operational decision require a checklist? Is that a good way to think?
I don't like the word should, but I imagine it would be super helpful. If you think about the lease business, what drove me to write that. By the way, this took 13 years to develop all these systems and these competencies. More than one time, I'd have a client come to me and say, that lease that I signed, I didn't realize that the plumbing wasn't included. And now they have a $40,000, in one case, $120,000 above budget leasehold improvement because they didn't read the lease properly. Another example, I had a client move out of a space because there was ants, and she had a restaurant. And in 2 years, she just couldn't get rid of the ants. And so what happened? A minute later, another business moved in there with food right after them, but they had no idea. And so had the new owner gone in there, or had she gone in there in advance, those things are just eyes wide open because it's really easy to get caught in traps. So I think those checklists are really important.
One of the notes I made in going through the field guide was that you differentiate between strategy and tactics, and the checklists seem pretty tactical in a real way. But you also have some thoughts about how to allocate time between strategy and tactics. Tell us about that.
Well, that's I think for the listeners to identify the difference between working strategically, which is like working on the business, creating systems, thinking about how the business operates. And then the tacticals, most small business owners are, they're technicians, they're hairdressers, mortgage brokers, massage, whatever manufacturers, they're doing the work that the business does. So that's with your hands. And if you think of it, anything that you have to do with your hands or your mind, that you're actually doing the work, you're an employee in the business. And the strategic is the thinking about and the strategy. And I like to think if you can pull out an hour a day, or ideally 5 hours a week as a starting point, to be strategic, to take a step back and say, what are my systems? What are the things that I like to say, like how to decide if the system's important is if it's hurting your reputation. So you're out in the community and someone says, so-and-so didn't call me back, or something's happening that's you can do all the marketing you want in the world, but if you don't have, if you get feedback that something's going wrong, you've got to, again, it's a system, there's a loop, there's a problem with that issue. So if it's hurting your reputation, if it's costing you money, you want to look at those systems. And things that you don't actually know how to do yourself, you want to make sure that they're documented somewhere. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but just means that you don't ever get held ransom by an individual that's in your business. So those are probably three good places to start with, thinking strategically about writing systems.
But you specifically set aside time to do that. Friday afternoon from 2 till 4, I'm going to think strategically and drop my checklist. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not the same for everyone. Some people prefer 1 hour a day. Some people like to just take a day. That's their strategy day, strategy weekend, whatever works for them. Because it's too easy just to jump in and keep working.
Yeah, otherwise you'd never do it. Yeah. So your third system, just going in the order they're in the field guide, Beverlee, is financial systems. And similarly there, you talk first about record keeping and reports and how important they are. I can tell you with some of the entrepreneurs I have been able to deal with, that's a real problem to just keep on top of record keeping and reports. What's your experience and how do you fix it?
Yeah, I love that. If you think about it, in the past there was you remember the shoebox accounting? Yeah, now it's all on the phone, and maybe they've collected and maybe they haven't, or if you're a construction guy, I've seen all the invoices on the dashboard. But if you think about it, if you wait to the end of the year and ask your accountant, here, do my bookkeeping. So let's say your year end is December 31, you get your statements back on March 31 of the next year. So if the stuff that happened in the previous January caused a big problem, so there's no way you can go back and fix it. You're 15 to 18 months behind the 8 ball. So let's flip that around. We have a bookkeeping system. We have a business credit card, a business bank account. All the information goes through one system. You don't mix the two of them up. Keep your personal stuff out of the business. It's all automated, and you reconcile your bank accounts once a month. So you have clean data to work off of. So whether sandwiches are selling better than cupcakes, or whether this particular, you have that data in real time to be able to make those decisions. And it prevents you from fraud. It helps you make good tax decisions by having the bookkeeping records. If your records are behind, and if you don't have a bookkeeper that's doing their job, find another bookkeeper. This is critical to your success, is knowing your numbers every single month.
Do I need a bookkeeper, or can QuickBooks do it for me if I operate it properly?
It can, and someone has to reconcile it. Because at the end of the day, the reconciliation just means this is what my bank statement says, and this is what QuickBooks say. Is it the same? Because this is where the issues can happen. You could have a duplicate invoice or duplicate expenses, or you could have someone stealing from you. We did a renovation here a few years ago, and we got the invoice for the garage doors 27 months after we put the doors in. And someone new went in. The company didn't have very good record keeping systems, and just a few $100,000 things. Like the company was on the brink of bankruptcy, and it's so common. Even thinking with construction, like keeping track of change orders, change notices. Oh yeah, well, can you just do something else over here while you're here? Yes, and so entrepreneurs are really generous. They want to please people. They're the most generous people on the planet. And at the same time, you need to track. If you're doing stuff and you're making money, you need to track it. And that's your bookkeeping system. And then the next part of it is, say you have this data, knowing how to read it. Like an income statement is not scary. And so you can design your income statement to be exactly the way that you understand it. Sit down with someone. Entrepreneurs will say to me, I don't have any money and I have this big tax bill. Well, if you could read your income statement, you'll see that money is sitting on your balance sheet. I've really explained those. I think chapter 4 of my new book really talks about the money really well in really simple language, in language that I wish I had when I was 31 and with the travel agency, to say like, okay, well, the money that I made over there, oh, okay, I bought something or I paid down debt. So now I understand I'm in a better position, so that you're not freaked out about money.
One of the points that Andrew Fraser made when he was here, Andrew, is that entrepreneurs often have a difficulty understanding, or they don't think about, the difference between cash flow and profitability and debt and the P&L and the balance sheet. Do we need to spend time learning those concepts thoroughly?
We do. Because, you can be all proud. Oh, I got $1 million contract. Woohoo! And your cost of goods sold is $1,500,000. This happened in 1997 when I owned the agency. The airlines took away our revenue. We lost 70% of our revenue in one day. And I remember talking to an agent, which was about a couple of weeks after this happened. And it was just a fact that the agents had done it themselves. 39% of all travel agents went out of business that month, by the way, back in 1997. So I was talking to this agent, and we were talking about how she couldn't see how she could give up discounting. And so we went through the numbers and I said, okay, so right now you're selling first class tickets, you're making $200. If the tickets are $2,000, you're giving away 5%. Right. Okay. So you're giving away $100. Right. And so now, and you're earning $50. And she went, right. Okay. So she realized she was actually giving away $50 on every ticket. So yeah, you need to know your numbers and your gross revenue. And then of course, cash flow, you can have great sales. If you need to buy things to be able to produce those sales, you need the cash to do it. So yeah, you really need to keep an eye on your cash.
There's a section in your financial systems too, Beverlee, about access to capital funding. You say it's okay to borrow money, but you have rules for borrowing money. What are the rules?
Don't borrow from black jackets. Sorry.
Well, that's one rule.
Sorry. I just I'll be really generic here. There's just some traps. There's credit card companies that will lend you money. There's traps that go with it. We'll give you $10,000 for your cash flow now. You only have to pay back X% of the amount that you borrowed, the exorbitant interest rates. And without saying words, there's a lot of traps for where you borrow your money from. Obviously, friends and family is difficult because your business, you want to avoid that if you can. I think the environment is a little more. There's a little bit more options available for borrowing since post pandemic. There's a little bit more money for small business. The trick is go back to tracking your money. You need to have updated financial statements, and you need to be profitable. So if you're writing off your son's brother's, uncle's, cousin's cell phone and all your company and the toilet paper for the whole neighborhood just to get all your to get your profit down so that it shows that you're not profitable. And now you've kind of turned yourself upside down. You're not going to be able to borrow money. So you have to make sure that keep your expenses, your real expenses. I think that's a tricky thing to do, but people always say write off as much as you can to get it down, but that ends up shooting yourself in the foot. It's hard to get a mortgage if you do that. And it's definitely harder to borrow money.
You also have systems for culture and teams. And those things sound a bit more touchy-feely than systematic. So what are your systems for culture?
Well, it's interesting because that was an area that I was really struggling. I was working with a very large corporation when the oil and gas tanked in 2017 or 18, lost, I don't know, maybe in their case, again, another 60, 70% of their revenue. And I was kind of looking at all these things and I realized the biggest issue was the culture. So I went back and got a graduate certificate in organizational development. I already had one in executive coaching. And so what I realized in the first week is okay, so I was introduced to some of the great US consultants, Edgar Schein, Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And so the culture can be, it really has, I always thought the culture was related to the systems, the statement on the wall and those kinds of things. And what I learned, especially from Dr. Schein, who actually passed away in January this year at age 94. And before doing that, he gave me permission to put some of his work in my book, he's just a really kind gentleman. And he said, the primary embedding mechanisms of culture are more related to what the entrepreneur, what the small business owner pays attention to, what they measure and what they control on a regular basis, how they react to incidences, how they allocate resources. And so there's some thinking there about how you behave as the leader. You favoring your kids over other employees. What's the price you're paying for that? So again, it can be a system of a leadership system within culture. It's just about awareness, how you hire, how you give status to others. I think in the sense of culture as well, when people have a position agreement and they know how they're being measured and they know what's expected of them, you have a happier team. The number one frustration for employees is they don't know how they're being measured. They really don't know what they're supposed to be doing. Because again, the entrepreneur is so busy, the business owner is so busy, they haven't stopped to put together, well, how do we do it? And so people come to work, they love their job, they want to contribute, so they just contribute what they know. But there's always that disconnect. So having those pieces in place along the HR. I'll give you one more example. And because all the 5 connect to each other. Let's say you get your employees, at least in Canada, it's this way. So if I give an employee $1 an hour raise, it's $2,500 a year. So let's say you got 3 employees, you give them $2 an hour raise. You can see how quickly that changes. So having a system for compensation is essential for profitability, for stability.
The last system we'll touch on is the marketing system. There's a little bit of a misunderstanding sometimes between what's marketing and what's sales and what's customer relationships. And you also cover building a brand, which maybe people don't think of as a small business concern. So tell us about your marketing system. How do we go about building that?
Well, the brands, well, because as you mentioned, that last strictly is consistency. So get your visual identity guide, make a decision how you're going to show up and be consistent with that. It can be as simple as that. I think the biggest frustration that I see with marketing, it's like the shiny light syndrome. So whether it's TikTok or whatever the new latest, greatest marketing place is, everyone runs to there. But what they don't understand is they don't understand their target market. And they go, okay, well, this is my target market. I'm way out here. It's everybody. Well, it's not everybody. And so I think working with an entrepreneur and really figuring out who exactly is it that's going to buy from you and really understanding them and catering and marketing to that individual. And it ties into price. Are you the high end, the low end? People, it's been proven they'll buy the same piece of art for $49, $490, $4,900, and $49,000. And so it's really understanding who you're marketing to.
Yeah, you really hit on the core of the way we think, which is understand your customer in depth, including their emotional needs as well as their product needs, and to make a promise. That's what we call a value proposition. And if you make a promise, you've got to keep it. You got to keep it every time, and you've got to keep it precisely. So that's the way we think about marketing. So it sounds like you and I are on the same page there.
Exactly. And the only way you can keep your promise is to have your systems and have them documented. Because if they show up one time and they get one experience, and they show up the second time expecting that, bringing a friend, and they get a different experience, well, you've just wasted all that marketing effort and you haven't kept your promise. And so the only way as a small business owner is to I knew in my travel agency, everyone had to do it my way because I actually did it better. And so they couldn't, you had to call people back within 90 minutes. The way the tickets went in the envelope was exactly the same way. You had to have your frequent flyer number for every client. You had to have the seat booked for every client. It was I made it the Somerville way. It was Somerville travel. And so we all did it consistently. And because of that, we reduced our errors to almost nothing. I think there was 1 or 2 mistakes in 7 years. And so you can then you don't even have to market. That's why we say marketing is last. Get your house in order. Then it's easy you've got a money machine there. Then it's just a matter of, turning the key.
One of the things we also find, Beverlee, is that you keep your promise, as you say, every time like that. And that's not going to get you talked about. If you go above and beyond, you give the customer an extraordinary experience, that gets talked about. And if you fail, that gets talked about. But just doing it every day, even brilliantly, doesn't get you talked about. Do you face that problem as a small business?
Well, I like what you said. So you just differentiated yourself there. So extraordinary, I would ask you, what is extraordinary? What exactly does that mean? So extraordinary means fill in the blanks. This is the user experience, to quote the computers now, that UX user experience, it needs to be flawless. If your promise is extraordinary, then provide that consistency. If I want a latte, doesn't matter where in the world I go to Starbucks, I'm going to get my grande, non-fat, no foam almond milk latte identically the same way. I'll get the same smell, the same uniform. And I'm not saying that a small business needs to be that systematized, but it sure helps.
I think your advice there, what would be extraordinary here? I've got to do what's expected, but how can I go above and beyond? That's a bit of a challenge sometimes.
Consistently. If you've done it once, there is a system for it, potentially.
You could write it down.
So write down. I want to touch on just the creatives that are all rolling their eyes right now, because this is what happens. Like, well, I'm a creative company. I'm an artist, a musician. I don't need systems. Well, if you think about Cirque du Soleil or the Philharmonic Orchestra, the systems are the sheet music. With the Cirque du Soleil, if someone doesn't lift their left arm at exactly precisely the right moment, someone's going to get hurt. So that's the system. So if you think of a system that way, I think it's helpful.
The field guide that you provide, it's got just an enormous amount of content. You said it took 13 or 15 years. I'm surprised it didn't take longer because there's so much in there. But one of the things is tools and templates. There's a lot of them, and they're very comprehensive. And I wanted to ask you, should the small business owner be using those, filling them out, following them exactly, or do you want them in their heads as a more general guide? Which is better? Or maybe it's a combination of both.
Yeah, I was frustrated by what was available on the market. And when I looked at, I think that I call it like market coaching. So, someone will put a program together and they'll just kind of like grab this, grab that, and this is a good idea and this looks good. So what I wanted to do is I wanted academic credit for the work I was doing. And I also wanted to fulfill my promise to that business owner. And so there's no fluff in this book. So by filling out the sheets, if you pick the ones, that's why the game board doesn't have a beginning, a middle, or an end. It's like you might be an accounting company, you fit your finance really well, but you really suck at hiring. So maybe you go through the hiring system, the hiring checklist, you create your org chart, you create position agreements. So I wanted to provide something for the market. It's actually unique in the world because it was built by a small business owner that was in the trenches. It wasn't built by someone that's, wanting to put something together for the sake of.
Right. It's not theory. One of the examples I picked out of your tools was how well do you know your customer? And we pride ourselves on thinking that we know our customer and we could articulate that and intellectualize it. But you had this long list of questions, and I thought that's really useful to ask myself every one of those questions. And of course, I found places where I didn't know my customer quite as well as I should, and just immensely, immensely helpful. So, is that you compile those over the years? You keep adding to your list of questions. How do you compile it?
Yeah, well, for my business coach training program, I've written all the questions down. I have almost 5,000 questions. So each of the competencies has, 60 to 80 questions in each of those areas. I'm thinking about for how well you know your customers. I love the story about with the travel agency. I knew that seniors, I noticed like for watching for patterns, and sometimes you can't do it in a minute. So this is why the field guide, you just keep it handy there. So I noticed that the seniors were buying fall color tours in February, first week of February, consistently. At this point, I was an agent for 13 years when I opened my agency. I would spend $500. Now, keep in mind, I'm a single mom. I barely have enough money to do this. I've remortgaged my little house. I've taken on a rent. I've hired an employee. So I'm going to give up $500 in February because I know that's when the seniors are going to buy it. So I took out a half a bus, put out the ad, filled the whole bus. So I made thousands of dollars because I knew the 7th of September was going to sell out on February 5th. On the other side of that, the concrete show in Las Vegas, all the construction workers, they bought those tickets at the last minute, the last week before. So I would take 20 seats on the plane. I would take premium hotel rooms and I'd hang on to them. And it was a little bit like gambling, but entrepreneurs like that. But I knew the concrete show was sold out every year for the previous 10 years. So why not capitalize on that? So that's an example of really knowing your customers.
Yeah, and being able to identify patterns of behavior by those customers. I like that part of systems thinking that you can't always predict, but you can see patterns of behavior and they may repeat in some way. Let's just go there, Beverlee. When you talked about being a systems thinker, and one of the things they always tell us is there's emergence in systems, there's surprises, there's unpredictable outcomes. So no matter how systematic your checklist and templates and tools and procedures manual, you're still going to get surprises. How do you guide your small business owners in that regard?
Yeah, well, I think change is the only constant. I know that's not something that I made up just now, that change is inevitable. And so I interviewed one of my clients on another event during the pandemic, and she described it as like if she had come into chaos, which was the pandemic, from chaos, they would have crashed. But they came into the pandemic with systems and structure in place, and they were able to then adapt and pivot, which was the fancy word back then. But change is inevitable. We don't know what's happening in the world. Change happens in our own lives, in our own families. I think the advantage, the stability that systems give you is that it gives you the opportunity to own a business and to be free of the business. So get the business to run independent of you. So you can choose to work in it. I'm not saying, because entrepreneurs again will say, no, but I like working in my business. That's what I love to do. Yes, and you can choose to work in it or you can choose to step away. And so thinking about what that model looks like and then working towards that. And then when changes happen, like when we lost our revenue, the airlines took away our commission. It was that year, even though the revenue went down 70%, if we had stayed the same, we switched to fee-based pay the next day and our revenue went up 11%. So that was an example of we had a base system in place, shifted the system. And I think that's when I became a business coach because I went around then, now with a new baby. Brent and I have been together at that point and married now 30 years. And I went around to all the other travel agencies and shared the system. Here, this is how we do it. This is what we're doing. This is my price list. And looking back, I think that's when I really realized that we're all in this together as small business owners.
Yeah, nice. Well, let's summarize the resources that you make available to people, Beverlee, so generously. So your latest book is coming out October 5th. It's called Small Business, Big Opportunity. Tell us about that. What can we get out of that?
Systematize your small business, create personal freedom, and live the entrepreneurial dream. And so, again, most authors write their book first and then a field guide. I've done it the opposite way. So if you want to read my story and then really read about the truth and hear the stories of small business owners, not just the problems, but what are the solutions? How do you deal with change is one of the chapters. Show me the money is another chapter. Lead the way. I'm really, really proud of the book, and it's a great resource for small business owners, and excited to have it out on October 5th.
We'll link to that. And then your field guide, can I just buy that from your website, or is that available elsewhere too?
Yeah, currently available on our website. It will be available on Amazon in about a month because it includes all the tools. Like you register for a link that gets you all the. It's a little bit more complicated, but we have a system for that. We're working on it.
And what's the website address?
Systemsbusinesscoach.com.
Systemsbusinesscoach.com. So we'll make that link, and then I've been there, I bought the book, and then I find that I've got access to all kinds of other online tools and coaching and those kinds of things as well. Tell us what else people can find there.
Well, again, with the True System, if you come into our world, we have an online community where there's access to, like you said, we have a monthly challenge, and really wanting to, again, lift each other up, share resources, share systems.
Who's in your online community? Not all travel agents.
No. Yeah, it's funny. You can't teach. The travel agents don't want to be taught by a former travel agent. So that's interesting. Yeah, it's a little bit threatening there, but we've got coaches all over the world now. It's great. We've got coaches in Lithuania, New Zealand, Malaysia, Germany, England, Nigeria. Now one of our graduates, Mexico.
You're coaching the coaches?
Yeah, the thing is, I had a 2-year waiting list for 5 years, and I thought, this is ridiculous. How am I really going to ever make a ding in the universe, as from Steve Jobs' speech? If it's just me, I can only do so much. So I've been training other people how to do what I do. And, if there's folks out there that really care about small business owners, they want to help or they are helping them, I've got that roadmap figured out. So that's a big part of what I do now.
You think about the potential for the future. If you have an army of coaches helping small businesses everywhere, wherever they might be in the world, using the systems, which could be that's a global application, right? That doesn't have to change for local conditions. It's something that everybody can use everywhere. Well, that's fabulous. So give us your parting shot, Beverlee. You're supposed to do the elevator pitch at the beginning, but we're at the end. Summarize for small businesses all of the benefits of applying all of the systems that you apply as briefly as you can.
As briefly as I can. It boils down to prosperity and freedom. To have enough money to take the issue of money off the table and the time to enjoy it. And you can do that through systems.
Well, I love that. When we talk about what truly matters to people, you've identified that, right? Freedom and joy.
Yeah.
Well, Beverlee, thank you. We'll make all those connections on our show notes, and we'll send people to buy your books, and we'll do everything we can to support you, because you're supporting people in small business, and that's the backbone of the economy, and we're cheering along with you. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I appreciate how much you care as well. It really shows.
We're together in that.
This has been another episode of the Value Creators Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can visit thevaluecreators.com for links and resources related to this episode, and check out hunterhastings.com for more content on entrepreneurial business management based on value creation principles.